Some brands offer you low finance, or cashback, or servicing.
Renault don't do ors. We do ands. The Renault Kadjar with 1.91% APR and €1,000 cashback and 3 years servicing, saving you thousands. Renault, the brand with the ands. Visit your local Renault dealer. Finance is made under a hire purchase agreement. Terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. Subject to lending criteria. See Renault.ie.
No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. I'm your host, Jess Root, and I have Seth Cox on the line. How are you doing today, Seth?
Good, Jess. How are you?
Doing great. We've got a great show in line for you today, as we will be talking about the Arizona Cardinals and their win over the Washington Redskins this past Sunday, 30-20. And they did so with Carson Palmer, despite smoke and mirrors and cloak and dagger decision when it came to the quarterback position. Looked like it was going to be Logan Thomas. Then Drew Stanton was cleared for his concussion. Then the weekend was, well, maybe these guys will, I don't know who's it going to be. Bruce Arians saying first time in 20 years. I honestly don't know who's going to start. Sunday morning comes around before the game. Carson Palmer works out. There's all sorts of reports saying that they expect Palmer to do it. He still had to throw, and then they had all three quarterbacks on the field warming up until then the inactive list came out, and all three of the quarterbacks were active, and so no one knew for sure until Carson Palmer was announced in the starting lineup. And he was announced on the field. So a lot of drama that led to, but Carson Palmer came back. The Arizona Cardinals get the 30-20 win over the Washington Redskins in a game in which they didn't play particularly well. They had some good offense. But sputtered. They didn't turn the ball over. Carson Palmer again, no interceptions. The Arizona Cardinals through 5 games have yet to throw one, although Brian Arakpo should have had one. And they pulled ahead in the second half. They did what they needed to do. They pulled ahead. They could have put it away, but couldn't quite do it. And then right at the end of the game, Kirk Cousins throws an inexplicable pass in the middle of the field to Rashad Johnson, who picks it off and returns it for a touchdown to end the game, putting the game away at 30-20. For you gamblers out there, and you had money on this game, you were either thrilled or disgusted with that play, as it actually happened to be one of two backdoor covers on Sunday afternoon, with the Denver Broncos getting a pick six to get the cover, and Rashad Johnson's pick six, who the Cardinals were up 3, but the line was 3.5. That touchdown that he scored gave the Cardinals not only the sure win, but also the cover. So I'm sure there were some people with money on this game who were either absolutely thrilled with the results or completely frustrated with those type of fluky plays. Anyhow, Arizona Cardinals get the win. They are now up to 4-1 on the season, in first place, alone in first place in the NFC West, as the Seattle Seahawks lost at home 30-23 to the Dallas Cowboys. And it's the way you hear Seattle fans, it sounds like the sky is falling as they lost the Cowboys. The Cowboys fans now thinking they're a Super Bowl team. The Arizona Cardinals are right there with really no super impressive wins, but they're getting wins. So they're now 4-1 of the season. They came out of that game healthy. No new injuries other than a couple of banged-up players. Frosty Rucker, still has a calf injury that he's had earlier this year. Andre Ellington with his foot. But Carson Palmer's shoulder, his nerve, had no issues. He recovered nicely on Monday. Calais Campbell is still out, but he was jogging today, and there's an out. It's unlikely he will play this weekend, but perhaps will be able to play against Philadelphia. With the health of the quarterbacks back in line, they made a couple of practice squad moves over the past couple of days. Dennis Dixon, whom they signed last week as insurance in the case that Logan Thomas had to start, he picked up his $6,300 for the week of being on the practice squad, and he was bid adieu. The Cardinals also let go of linebacker Jonathan Brown, and instead brought in Kalen Burnett, a former Raiders linebacker. Put him to the side.
Fan of Revenge of the Birds.
Or I don't know if he's a fan or just, hey, someone wrote about me, let's follow them. I don't know. It was within a minute I put the post up. I put the post up, and it had his name in it. I didn't even tag him or anything, and all of a sudden he's following the site account, and I'm guessing he probably has a search for his name, and he's like, oh, I'll follow. But they add the linebacker Kalen Burnett and also cornerback Ross Weaver to the roster. So that is the long and the short of what we have in terms of the game, and we have a couple of things that are new. But now, Seth and I, let's go ahead and talk about the game, as we have a few things that we want to go over. We're going to talk about both sides of the ball. We're going to talk about the offense. We're going to talk about the defense, and we're going to talk about the quarterback situation. How Carson Palmer did. We're going to talk about how can the Cards keep winning, especially the way they are winning. We're going to look ahead to we're going to look at the schedule the rest of the way, and end with some stuff. I guess from Twitter that Seth's going to talk a little bit of draft. I'll let him carry that weight a little bit. We'll talk a little bit of draft stuff. So Seth likes to talk about that stuff, even though it's October and the draft's in April.
April, May, but yeah, I mean, it's never too early.
Well, do you know anything about the only thing I'm absolutely certain of about these practice squad additions is, Kalen Burnett, he was with the Raiders up till about a month ago. He was on injured reserve. They gave him an injury settlement, and now he's signed with the Cardinals. The reason he's on the team, I am absolutely certain, is to steal whatever knowledge he has of the Raiders' defensive schemes and calls and whatever. I'm sure that's the main thing. I will be honestly surprised if he stays on the roster beyond this week and then they bring back Jonathan Brown. But that's my guess. I don't know anything about Ross Weaver. You know anything about either of these players?
No, I really don't. I looked them up a little bit. It's hard to get a gauge on what is going on. I think you're kind of right. Kind of just soak them from information in terms of, like you said, line calls, defensive calls, and be on your way with them after you're done.
He was a special team standout for the team a season ago. He was second on the team with 10 special teams tackles, and he also forced a fumble. He was undrafted out of Nevada in 2012, so he's a teammate of Dante Moak in Nevada, former Cardinals player who was also from Arizona, was with the team last year and was cut this past offseason. I believe he's back in Cincinnati is where he signed. I don't know if he stuck around, though.
Yeah, no, I think you're just going to see him. I mean, maybe they're looking in terms of, I don't even know how to speculate on it, to be honest with you. Maybe they're looking in terms of they need to improve some of their special teams coverages, maybe, because like you said, I did see that in his kind of Pro Football Focus file, that he had some special teams plays, and that's about the extent of it. I mean, at this point, with how little rotation they're seeing in linebackers, I don't know if you're gonna, really find somebody off the waiver wire that's going to necessarily come in and do anything.
Yeah, and Cardinals like bringing in a linebacker, so there should be no surprise that whether they had like 20 linebackers so far this season, it feels like.
Yeah, if not more. Yeah, it's been odd, and everybody was. I mean, we'll get to it. Everybody was very happy about Desmond Bishop and Glenn Carson, and
they haven't been active yet.
Yeah, a lot of guys that aren't even active. So it seems like it's just an information grasp at this point. And some people might say, why do you need to worry about that? It's the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders, you know what? They almost beat the Patriots. What was that, 2 or 3 weeks ago? And they almost beat the Chargers this weekend. They're not terrible by any means. So,
they're kind of like the Redskins. I mean, Washington's got a talented roster. They haven't been able to put it together. Bruce Arians even said he's like looking in the mirror from a season ago. We're looking at the Redskins. They've got talent on the roster, but they just don't know how to put it together, and they don't believe in themselves yet. It's kind of that situation where the Cardinals were at the beginning of last year, only they didn't have. They're further behind the 8 ball than Arizona was last year. They didn't fall to. They didn't get behind to 1-5 like Washington's done.
Yeah, and so I think, you'll probably just grab as much information as you can and then be on the way kind of type thing. And that's not a bad thing. Anything that can give you an upper hand in any situation at all, I think you do it, especially in the NFL, especially in what you could call a trap game, so to speak.
Yeah, and, well, Let's go ahead and get into the game to talk about the game that happened. Let's talk quarterback situation now. I was convinced at the beginning of last week. I wrote a piece on it about how all signs pointed to Logan Thomas because I was a little bit worried about Drew Stanton's concussion. He didn't get cleared early in the week. Carson Palmer didn't look. I didn't expect him to come back. So I thought it'd be Logan Thomas, and I said Cardinals be lucky to come away with a win. Turns out that they were lucky to come away with a win anyway, but Logan Thomas looked like early, got the reps, 90% of the reps all week. Drew Stanton got cleared on we get the news of that Friday evening and said, oh, I guess it'll be Drew. That feels better. I felt comfortable picking a Cardinals win. And then out of the blue, all of a sudden Carson Palmer, even though let me take this, Bruce Arians has said, oh, he's got to get a full day of practice in, full work practice to be able to throw the ball. And he said he got about a quarter of the reps, quarter and a half of the reps in practice on Friday. And I guess he convinced Arians or was able to make enough of the throws. He wasn't perfect, but he did well enough. And so what was your reaction? Did you expect Carson Palmer to be able to play? Was that a surprise to you? Or how was your reaction when you saw, hey, it's going to be Carson?
I guess hindsight, it's fine. I didn't like it to begin with because I felt like this was a winnable game for the Cardinals without Palmer. I mean, I thought it was winnable without Stanton, to be honest with you. Of course, then the run game was total garbage, and so I didn't see that coming. So that kind of made the difference in my mind. But it ended up fine, and so far through the week, it's been nothing but good things so far. We haven't heard anything bad, that he's had any setbacks from this. So, hindsight being 2020, I think it was the right call to make, especially with how, I don't want to say bad, but how much the offense struggled. So, you probably wanted to, have your quote unquote best player at the position out there. So you want that, you wanted that. And he gave him a little spark, with that pass to Floyd, which I thought was something that Floyd hasn't done, in terms of making a play on the ball with Stanton that he did with Palmer, at least in the end zone. And so I think that was, one of those things that it worked out in the end. So you kind of just say, okay, it worked out. Let's keep it going. But I definitely would have been one for the idea that these next 2 games, Palmer and Stanton get completely healthy and be ready for a very big and important stretch run coming up.
And I was happy to see Palmer get out there. Obviously, I was a little bit concerned about the fatigue, but Palmer knows what he can do. He's a gamer, and in fact, we saw it against San Diego. Now, in part, his nerve issue probably occurred more with the recovery after the game. But after he took that hit, after the hit that actually injured his shoulder, he played even better. I mean, he played better down the stretch. And, I think more than anything else, you saw in a couple of throws that where you're like, it's kind of easy to forget the talent level between Stanton and Palmer. When you say, oh, Stanton, he's winning us a game, so we could go with him. But then you see a couple of throws that Palmer makes, the end zone throw to Floyd for one, and you're like, wow. Drew probably doesn't do that. He probably doesn't even attempt the throw. And there's a few throws, and I said it before because I've seen him in practice. I say there's a reason why Carson Palmer is the starting quarterback. There is a definite drop-off in talent. I've said that all along. Now, in terms of effect in a game, if you have the right pieces around either one, you won't necessarily need one to be better than the other or need one to be more successful than the other, except I don't think there's anyone who believes that Drew Stanton is the type of quarterback where you could say, okay, go out and win us this game because we're not playing that great on other parts of other games. And Palmer is the guy, is a quarterback, we said it before. Palmer's a guy you can do that with. Now, sometimes he's going to lose you games, sometimes he's going to make some dumb throws and get picked off, but if you need it, he can do it. He did it a few times last year, and he did it against... we've seen him do it. He's a guy who can take his team and carry it on his shoulders, despite the reputation he has throughout the league. So I was thrilled to see him. I kind of would have liked to have seen Stanton for another start, although you do, of course, have the concern. Well, he's just recovered from a concussion. What happens if he gets hit again funny and he ends up losing the season? You don't want Logan Thomas to become the backup, and you don't want the risk of having the rookie Thomas to be a long-term starter in his rookie season, as we've seen before, and have this season turn into 2012, which it'd be disastrous. So I was thrilled. I was thrilled to see Palmer out there, and he played well enough. I mean, he was obviously you could see he was a little rusty. He couldn't make all the throws that he quite wanted to, but he was rather Carson Palmer-ish, and he was good enough. I'd say he was better than what Drew Stanton would have been, and he didn't turn the ball over, so it was a big plus in my eyes.
Right, and the most important thing was obviously that he stayed healthy. He threw some good balls. I think I had 3 or 4 negative throws where his wide receiver bailed him out or the defense bailed him out.
Arakpo.
But I mean, I was surprised, I guess would be the best word, that they threw the ball as much as they did. What were your thoughts on? I mean, was this just Arians saying? And I feel like this is Arians in general, so maybe you can lend some more inside information to this. But I feel like Arians was just saying, okay, if you're telling me you're good enough to play, then we're just going to throw the football like we would in any other game.
It seemed like that was the game plan, and the fact of the matter is they just weren't running the ball well, so they had to throw. The running game was really kind of abysmal overall, and so they had to throw the ball. And Arians said after the game, I don't know how much to believe when he said that, but he said, 44 times, it's, we knew that there were going to be stretches where we're going to have to throw the ball. And Palmer's a guy, and granted, he's there wasn't necessarily any risk of setback as there was of fatigue, and the fatigue he's going to feel anyway. Palmer said he didn't expect that. I didn't expect to get 18 throws. I wonder if that was in reaction to, because there was one game last year, I don't know which one, it was 18 attempts, and we said, hey, is he being Alex Smith? Is that what we want to see him? But referring to a game last year, we only had 18 pass attempts. 44 is a very Bruce Arians type game. Now obviously they didn't run the ball enough, but that was because they haven't run the ball well, honestly, since Jonathan Dwyer left the team.
Well, yeah, and I think not having, kind of a different punch than Ellington has hurt this team. Something, we'll get into in a little bit. But, yeah, it was interesting. I didn't see that coming, honestly, but like you said, maybe I think he came out, and I think it was the first 4 plays were all throws, and that was interesting to me. It was like, okay, you're obviously trying to, show that, okay, no matter if he's hurt or not, we're going to throw the ball, and I'm going to figure out if he's hurt for real. And so I thought that was an interesting way to go about it. It was interesting to me to watch this game as opposed to the first game because it looked like a different game plan. I don't know what you thought about it, but it looked like a different game plan coming from Arians, where a lot of the passes seemed shorter, and they worked their way kind of from short to long more than they were long to short like he normally does. I think I counted something like 4 screens to the tight ends, which I thought was interesting. But I think that's what Arians wanted to do. I think he wanted to see what Palmer had and kind of just go from there. And you look at the numbers, and I think you're just satisfied that he was healthy and he played well.
It was a real effective. It was a real effective game. He completed over 63% of his passes, got to 250 yards. It's not huge yards. It's not a big Carson Palmer yardage game. Threw for 2 touchdowns, and more importantly, didn't throw a single interception. In terms of the very beginning of the game, I think it was one of 2 things. I think it part was to send the message to Washington as much as it was to send the message to Palmer's teammates that we trust Carson. It was Carson is here to lead. He's going to do this. It's not some, scaled back version of the offense. And it was kind of to put Washington on the heels a little bit, who might have been expecting more of a rushing attack because of the uncertainty at quarterback, and so to come out and throw the ball right away and as many times as they did would kind of put them on their heels, perhaps, and have them change what they were, or change their expectations as to what they would be facing.
Right, and I have to go back and look at my numbers, but I'm pretty sure they tried to run the ball more in like the middle of the game, and then of course at the end where they kind of were
failed at it, and they failed.
Yeah. But I felt like they, after they did the first, they started with those passes, then they kind of got to more of a balanced attack, and then they noticed that wasn't really working, so they kind of moved on to their next attempts of trying to throw the ball around again. And like you said, it worked. So I don't think you're upset by the play of Palmer. I don't think you're upset by the game plan. I was just surprised that they would bring him back. Especially I think Arians just said on Alex Marvez's radio show that his arm's only at 85%. So it's like, well, do you want to put him out there? I understand he's definitely the best quarterback that you have, but do you really want to put him out there and risk injury or, a setback when he's only at 85% in a game where you are the superior team no matter who you put at quarterback? But obviously at the end of the day, they had to have Palmer because it was a lot closer than the score at the end of the game.
It really was. At the end, you're like, oh, well, it was very good that they had Carson. And to the point you said about the arm strength, Palmer said it after the game on Sunday. It's not so much of workout things. So it's not like not throwing is going to help him. He has to throw the ball to get stronger. So it doesn't, at this point, because the nerve's in a good place, it's simply a case he just needs to throw more. He's at 85% strength, but he's not going to get stronger by not throwing. The reason why he's at the percentage he's at now is because he went so long without throwing the ball, and what he needs to do is throw the ball. So there's no reason why you shouldn't play him. He's not at any further risk of injury. It's at this point. It's a kind of touch and go all the way. He said we're not out of the woods all season, but he got his shoulder and got the nerve in a good place. So he just needs to throw the ball. So he needs to practice. He needs to play, and that's how he'll get his arm strength back. And hopefully between this week and the game on Sunday and the next week, he could have a loaded gun again, right at 100% for the Philadelphia game when really that tough stretch of games begins, which we know of.
Right, and I wonder, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, but I wonder if Stanton had not been concussed in the Broncos game, if they would have even tried it. I think, that's something I would be interested in, is if Stanton had not taken the hit in the previous game, would they have just held Palmer back the next 2 weeks, let him get to as much to 100% as he possibly could have, instead, but they knew having, Stanton out there, like you said, would be more of a risk of a second concussion and putting him probably out for the year. And like you said, then you have Logan Thomas back up for the rest of the season.
And I know there's some Logan Thomas fans out there. There are, and he gives me enough hope to think, okay, we'll see in a year or 2 or 3. But no, I'm really through with the rookie quarterbacks being tossed out there, a la John Skelton, a la Ryan Lindley. Let's let him figure things out and get some kinks worked out. So yeah, let's not do that anymore. And that's a good point. Again, if we're going just by what Arian said, it was a matter of, if Carson's good to go, Carson's going to go, because it's Carson's team. He's a leader, and that's just what we need to do. I mean, the Cardinals want Palmer out there, and since the teammates look up to him, he's definitely. I mean, this team is Palmer's team. It's not Fitz's team. It's not Darnell Dockett's team. But when it comes to the team, they really look to Carson Palmer. First time they've had that at quarterback since Kurt Warner. It is his team. So I don't know if it would have been a case that they really held if they were worried about the concussion stand once he got cleared. I just really think that if they felt that Palmer could go, if he's physically able to do it, then hey, Palmer needs to be out there. Moving on, if we talk a little bit more about, if we look at the overall performance, how would you grade? If you had to give it a letter grade, I would give it a solid B-, because it wasn't fantastic. There were some throws that he missed. He almost had the interception. That's kind of been the case this year for Palmer. It's almost for his careers is the fact that he has had fortunate dropped interceptions. But I would give him a solid B- because he didn't turn the ball over. He did make some nice throws, but he didn't look completely. He didn't look completely up. There were some throws he missed, so he wasn't completely back or completely 100%. But how would you grade Palmer if you had to give him a letter grade? How would that work for you?
I had him at a B+. I thought he played well. I thought he made, like I said, I had 4 or 5 charted throws where he was off and it was just a bad throw. But other than that, I was happy with his performance. The difference in Palmer and Drew Stanton, a lot of people talked about like Palmer stepping up into the pocket. I looked at it a little bit differently, just going back and watching Stanton today on a couple of videos and then watching Palmer again today. I looked at it more as Palmer is willing to take what the defense gives him, where Stanton tries to hit the home run more, and so then he's standing back in the pocket. He takes more of like a hop step up as opposed to Palmer, who actually moves up into the pocket, kind of climbs the ladder, and then it makes the throw downfield, where Stanton is going to stay back there and try to get in, wait there for those deep routes to come open, something, and I think it's Palmer's understanding of the game and the speed of the game and having played more, and Stanton's understanding of what Arians wants to do on offense and how he likes to kind of run his offense, and that's, so he's going to try to do what Arians wants, whereas Palmer's going to do more what's the correct play and take what the defense gives you type stuff.
And for me, likewise, it's really interesting to. Now, I'll have to go back and look at it, but you can just tell Palmer's move around in the pocket. Week 1, the game on Sunday, he's moving around really well. He's not jittery. He's moving around with confidence. You can tell this year there isn't the concern of, wait, where do I go? I've got to avoid this pressure, and oh crap, I have no idea where I should go with the ball. He's moving around deliberately. He's looking very good and very comfortable, even when he has to move the pocket right or left. If he gets pushed off his spot, it's really been impressive to see him work, because we really haven't, again, since Kurt Warner, we haven't seen a quarterback do that. Because we had young guys who would hang in there and be tough, or Carson or Kevin Cobb, who would hang in there too long and get crushed, or would bail out back and right too early and then try to make a play on his short half of the field and throw it incomplete. So it's been really fun for me to watch him step back. Just the pocket awareness, the awareness that he has and the poise to be able to move around. And how about that throw that I don't know how he did it. It looked rather, somebody tweeted it, Carson Roethlisberger on that little pitch to Robert Hughes when he had, 3 or 4 guys hanging on him. He wiggled free and tossed it forward to Hughes for the first down. That's so not Carson Palmer, but between that and the scrambling in week 1 and then this weekend the attempt on the 3rd and 1 to pick up the first down, Carson's having fun out there.
Yeah, and he's playing at a level of comfort, as you said, and I think the fact that they've changed the offense a little bit. If you look from what they were running the first several weeks of last season to now, and I feel like the offense even looks a little different when Palmer's out there versus Stanton, where you're not seeing as many deep routes, you're not seeing as many deep throws. I don't know if that's Palmer, or I don't know if that's Arians, or I don't know if that's just a combination of they understand what needs to happen.
Or even just the game plans against the defenses they're facing.
Yeah, that could be it too. So, we'll see as it kind of goes through how it works out. But you look at it through, 2 games of the season, and he's on a nice little pace right now. Obviously, he's not going to get the 5,000 yards that everybody had hoped and the 30 touchdowns. But I think you're seeing a guy that can go for almost 4,000 yards and probably around 20 to maybe get into the middle 20s in terms of touchdowns, and you're happy with that. And you kind of combine that with what Stanton has done, and I think you're happy. I guess the one concern are the interceptions, because they're going to come. Nobody, doesn't throw any interceptions in a season.
Nick Foles, come on, Nick Foles.
He still threw 2 last year, right?
Yeah, whopping 2. I mean, come on. If Nick Foles can do it, Carson Palmer can do it.
But you remember too that Foles had a lot of interceptions dropped, just like Palmer has so far. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think right now you're happy.
Let's talk about the offense on the whole. If you have to give it an overall grade, my overall grade for the offense, I'd have to give it a solid C-, because they did control the ball. They were able to move the ball. I was watching the game and it felt, my goodness, this is Ken Wisenhunt's offense, is what it looked like to me. And that's in part, I know Bruce Arians, Ken Wisenhunt, they're not terribly different, other than the fact that Arians likes to push the ball more, and Wisenhunt likes to use that short passing game to just keep it going. Use it like a running game, but they controlled the ball for a long time. They would just sputter out, and they would just stop in executing when they got near scoring position, and this is why they had to go for so many field goals. They got the Fitz touchdown, they got the Floyd touchdown, and then field goals after that. And so it's a case of, they did well, they did their job well overall, but just couldn't put the points up. My points of concern are the running game and the offensive line. They really struggled with that. Carson Palmer was good. The receivers had a few drops, but they played much better than they did against Denver. But if you had to grade the offense overall, how would you grade it?
I agree with you. I think it was you'd be like at a B plus for the passing game and like a D.
that's a generous D.
Yeah, in the run game, I think it was, it was difficult. I think in pass protection you were pleasantly okay with what happened. Veldier kind of struggled in the game.
And in fairness, Brian Orakpo's a really good. And he's been banged up. He's not been the same player this year, but he is a dang good player.
Yeah, and I think again you saw your lower tier guys in Larson and Faneca kind of reared their ugly head in terms of the inability to stop interior pressure. Now, on the same token, the Redskins, like you said, not just Rakpo, but Ryan Kerrigan, who Bobby Massey stonewalled for most of the game, but also Jason Hatcher, who's their defensive tackle, I think is how they play it. Their defense is weird, like the Cardinals, in terms of how they actually line up. He had 11 sacks last year for the Cowboys. He's a pass rushing. He's kind of like Calais Campbell on the interior. So I think you knew that this could be a problem, and it was a problem, and that makes it, I think that's what makes it more concerning, is that you knew where the weakness was coming in, and you still couldn't game plan to stop it properly. So I think that's, for me, the biggest concern outside of the running game, and the fact that outside of Bobby Massey, I mean, has anybody really blocked well in the run game through so far this year? I don't know. I don't feel like. I mean,
didn't Faneca do well in week 1 and week 2? I'm just before he got banged up. Was he not pretty solid? And people were saying, "Oh yeah, that I guess Arians was right."
Yeah, and I think he did play well in those games. I'd have to go back and look at my grades on those games for Faneca. I think I graded him one of the higher rated guys on the line. Sindeline didn't play badly this week. He was okay, but Larson and Faneca and Veldier at times, they just don't create a push consistently in the run game, so it causes issues. What are the Cardinals at now in terms of percentage? This last game they were pretty far off in terms of their normal percentage of. Yeah, they were at almost a 60-40 split in pass run situations. So it's one of those things where, like you said, I don't think they want to throw the ball that much. I think Arians likes to be at about 55-45, but the fact that they can't run the ball at all puts them at that they were actually at 63-37. So I mean, that's a pretty big discrepancy. I don't think you want to see it that big.
No,
most weeks, but like you said, that was kind of, they had to do it at that point because of how poor they were playing in the run game.
And what's most disconcerting about the running game is, and we kind of see it, Andre Ellington's running production peters off as the game goes on. He's getting 4 and 5 yard games to start the game in the first and the early part of the second quarter, but then his rushing attempts, as he gets more attempts more in the game, because he's played a lot. I mean, the past couple of games he's hitting over 50 snaps, which is more than he ever did last year. I think he's topped 35, 40 maybe once, and those 3 and 4 and 5 yard games become 1 and 2 and negative yards. In part, now there were some Arians pointed to 2 or 3 times where there should have been a 10 or 20 yard run that the lineman didn't get to where they're supposed to. At least their guards pulling were just horrendous and ended up being negative plays. But the most disconcerting issue to me is the inability to do, and this has been something that has plagued the Cardinals for years. When they need 1 yard, they can't get 1 yard, 2nd and 1, and they end up having to punt, and they don't get any penalties. It's just absurd. 2nd and 1, and you run a throw to the flat to Hausler that's short of the sticks. Then it's 3rd and 1, and then you try Palmer and his. And that was Palmer. Palmer convinced Arians to let him keep the ball. And, yeah, that just didn't work either. It just been... When you need 1 yard, you should be able to say, we're getting 1 yard. There are plenty of teams in the league that have zero worries about 1 yard left. Even the Cardinals' run defense, as good as they have been the past couple of years, if a team's got 2nd and 1, they're usually picking it up. And the Cardinals have not been able to do that with anyone. Ellington's not particularly good at it. Stephon Taylor has been awful at it. Jonathan Dwyer was okay when he was here. Obviously, that's not an anymore. Jalen Parmalee was awful. I mean, his one rush attempt. I think there's a number of people hoping that Marion Grice can be that other guy because of his shiftiness, but it's really worrying the fact that they can't pick up 1 yard when they need it.
Well, and it's worrying that Grice has been here, 3 weeks now, and he still doesn't know the playbook. Because that's kind of what I tweeted out during the game, and I got a lot of smart aleck remarks that he's inactive. But if you just need a guy that can come in and run in those short yardage situations, and Ellington can't do it because he hasn't. Taylor can't do it because he hasn't. Can you not have him active for 5 runs or 6 runs a game? Is he that? Does he not understand the offense that much? I don't know. It's a legitimate question. It's not like, this is ridiculous. It's more of a why isn't he active just for those situations? Because it is clearly a problem.
And when I talked to Grice on Friday, and I talked to him just briefly, he still haven't. He thinks he's getting it, and then he'll be like, ugh. When the coach will say, no, they're supposed to do this and this, and it's just is like, I don't get it. So he's getting there, but he doesn't have a role yet, and I don't know what his role will be. I'm hoping that he can be, just in part because being an Arizona State Sun Devil fan myself and a season ticket holder for the Sun Devils, I would love to see him be that other guy, the second guy that picks up yards. I mean, he's not as big, and he's not as bruising, but he can run inside the tackles. It's something he is able to do. He's shiftier. Even Stephon Taylor, when I talked to him on Friday, I talked to Stephon on Friday. He used the same description as you. He's a glider. I'm a big Grice fan. I think there's potential there. If anything else, if he can learn the offense, Chester Taylor in terms, maybe not the 1,200-yard rusher Chester Taylor, but the guy that can do everything pretty well and is a really good backup to have.
Right, and one of the things that you and I talked about at the beginning of the season, I think it was, or right before the season started, with Ellington was you and I both voiced our concerns about this idea of Ellington as I don't want to say feature back, but as this workhorse back. I think we both agreed that where he's at right now, actually in terms of touches, is okay, but the fact that they don't have anybody else that makes
it's taking his effectiveness away. It's taking the big play threat away because nothing's being softened up for him, and so it's easy to key on him. It's really easy to do that.
Yeah, and he's down to 3.5 yards a carry.
Yeah,
that's not.
It's bad.
When we talked about the offense at the beginning of the year, I think I had him at 4.5 yards a carry, and you had him closer to 5, and we both agreed that there was going to be a drop off from the almost 6 yards a carry last year, but it wasn't going to be anything substantial. But now it is substantial, and it's like okay, it's clear that this isn't working. You and I voiced our concerns about that before the season, but I don't think even you and I thought it could get to this level of ineffectiveness.
And in fairness,
Right?
the issue is Jonathan Dwyer's gone, and Jonathan Dwyer is the perfect. He's the perfect type of back to do it. He's not he's not a star back, but he's a younger version of Rashard Mendenhall who had maybe a little bit more effective in some ways, but that's the type of back they needed. And Stephon Taylor just hasn't done it yet this year for whatever reason. He started out ahead of Dwyer, but Dwyer quickly went ahead of him and took all the carries, and now that Dwyer's gone, Taylor's not getting the carries.
Yeah, and I've in text, you and I have had the conversation, but I'm not a believer in Stephon Taylor. He's just too slow through the hole. He doesn't have an NFL game, in my opinion. But you look at how they're using him, and this is in my article for tomorrow. How they're using him right now, I really like. I actually do. I think it's really the right way to use him.
He's Alphonso Smith?
Yeah, he's Alphonso Smith. He's actually Robert Hughes a little bit. I mean, let me look. I got it right here. How do you spell Stephon? No, I'm just kidding. 16 snaps, 3 for carries, 10 yards. I mean, obviously that's what he is. 7, he went out and pass routes. He caught 1 pass. 6 blocking, 2 in the run game, and 4 pass protecting. I mean, he's basically a fullback, and I'm okay with that because he was a 5th-round pick. It's not like you're expecting. I know everybody expects Steve Keim to hit home runs
with every single pick. Yes.
Yeah, everybody's supposed to be a superstar and this and that, but it's okay if he's a fullback. I mean, that's okay. But then use him as a fullback, drop Hughes, and bring Grice onto the active roster. I mean, if that's what you're going to do, at least do it. And he did cut into Hughes's snaps in the last game. I think Hughes only played like 6 or 8 snaps, and so he, even though he caught the shovel pass from Palmer, that I think they're kind of phasing him out and moving Taylor into that role.
Well, what's interesting is the observation I made when you kind of point out with the Taylor Hughes thing. Hughes has kind of taken some of what Taylor was doing because they have brought him in when they have the 4 wide set and 1 back, and it's clear. And according to the NFL snap charts, Stephon had 15 snaps and Hughes had 11. And I've seen him the past couple of games. Earlier in the season, it was Stephon that would get these, or Dwyer that would get these. So when they went 4 wide with 1 back, who's their blitz pickup guy, they were using Stephon. They've been using Hughes more as that other guy who's the main pass protector, kind of the way they Wisenhunt used Anthony Sherman when they had absolutely nothing in the running back department to pass block.
Yeah, and I think you're right. They're just trying to. They're not using Hughes so much as a lead blocker in the run game anymore. They're just using him in passing situations where he can be in the block and maybe go out and catch a pass if he needs to. And it's just one of those things. It's Arians kind of maneuvering his chess pieces, if you will, because I mean everybody's talked about it. But the reality is this offense isn't very good right now. Their passing game is good, but as an offense in general, they don't score a ton of points. I think they're still in the 20s in points.
Yeah.
They pick up a lot of yards, but for me, yards is such a useless stat if you don't have points to go with it. And then their percentage of points per play, which I think is the best stat in terms of like defining how good an offense is in like the mid 20s. So they're just not a very effective offense. They're a good offense, but they're not effective. And I think that's where you and I think everybody, I mean, all Cardinals fans, maybe we drank too much Kool-Aid, but I think all of us thought that would be fixed. And obviously there's been the injuries and and that. But I think the fact that the run game is so bad, coupled with the inability to put points on the board consistently, I think that's where, kind of the concern creeps in of how, for a lot of people, and power rankings not giving the Cardinals credit and things of all of those kind of negative things. I think that's where that all stems from, is that they just haven't looked as good as everybody expected, so everybody's kind of waiting for them to play that A game.
Oh yeah, and we'll talk about that, because one of the questions that we were going to talk about is how long can they keep winning playing like this, because I'll keep using this. At the beginning of 2012, it was kind of the duct tape and chicken wire, or smoke and mirrors kind of way of winning, where they're getting enough from all three phases of the game. But we'll talk about that more. Let's talk to the defensive side. Things to celebrate, things to be concerned. Obviously, in the running game, with the run defense, there's nothing really to complain about. Now, in part, they were able to limit the carries they got because the offense had gotten a lead at some point. But in the absence of Calais Campbell and Matt Shaughnessy, they still held the Redskins to less than their season average, which was still in the mid-70s, since they held them to 72 yards on the game. And playing with a mix of Tommy Kelly and injured Frosty Rucker and Dan Williams and Ed Stinson. So in terms of the front seven, you have to be thrilled with the play. They played very well. You got Alex Okafor in getting pressure on the quarterback. I mean, the first time we've really felt that they've had a player to do anything in the pass rushing department other than Calais Campbell. Alex Okafor picks up a pair of sacks. He has 4 pressures and 2 hits. And Aaron's mentioned later in the game, he started getting the attention, getting chipped by tight ends and running backs, which is, once you start getting that, you can tell that you're being effective. And so my celebration is the front seven. So you keep losing guys. So they're down Abraham, they're down Washington, Dansby was gone, they're down Dockett, they're down Campbell, they're down Shaughnessy, and then what do you know? They still have a very good game against the run, and they got to the quarterback. What were the big celebrations for you?
Well, you and I talked about it last week, but I wasn't surprised that the defense, in terms of the run game, was still excellent, because that's just Bull's scheme. Martin got the hook really quick. I was actually kind of disappointed in that. But
I didn't see him out there at all. I didn't always listen to the starting lineup. I didn't catch him out there at all. So did his 6 snaps come right at the beginning of the game? And then
they did, and they ran right at him, and he literally was being moved out of the way. So they put Stinson, Williams, Kelly kind of flopped into that right in, Calais Campbell, and all of a sudden, you don't want to say they shut him down, but they played a lot better, and, kind of showed. The thing that hurts the Cardinals in terms of that loss of Campbell isn't any one thing other than Campbell was both their best, run stopper and their best pass rusher. So, you needed 2 guys to replace that. So far, you got the replacement of the run stopping with 3 different guys, and it was effective in game 1, and then Okafor came in and played well in his first game against one of the worst. I mean, and this isn't me like criticizing Okafor or anything, or saying take it with a grain of salt. This is just the reality. Okafor got a blessing in disguise in his first game in the NFL, really, because he got to go up against one of the 3 worst tackles in the NFL, Tyler Plummus. I mean, he's literally awful. He's already given up, I think it was 8 sacks.
8 sacks
now,
yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't like, it's not like he came in, was playing well, and Okafor just, I mean, that's just Tyler Plummus every week. And remember, he didn't play last week against the Seahawks. That was the
Morgan Moses.
Morgan Moses. So, I mean,
and he was awful too, and Moses was terrible too. So it wouldn't have been mattered either way.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he's given up 8 sacks in 4 games. That means so he's just bad, and that's what you want a guy to do when he goes up against a bad player, because that's what, as good as Matt Shaughnessy is against the run, he can't do that in pass rushing situations. So that's what we wanted to see. And the more I obviously this is the first time you got to see Okafor in the NFL for any significant amount of time, but he kind of reminds me of ex-Ravens linebacker and current Cleveland Browns linebacker Paul Kruger. Kind of that, what I call a secondary pass rusher, a guy that can come in and he cleans up a lot of things. He's a guy that can take advantage of bad right tackles in the NFL. A guy that would have taken advantage of Bobby Massey a couple of years ago, and come in and make plays on those guys, and that's important to have. And that got Paul Kruger a lot of money, and I think Okafor can be that type of player where he's never going to be a 15, 16 sack guy. He's never going to be a primary pass rusher where you line him up and watch him go.
But
he's
a
guy that can
8 and 9,
clean up. Yep, and I think that's exactly what he is and what you can see, and I think that's where he's headed.
The reason why I agree with you on the run, ability to stop the runs. Bowles does that. But the fact they're able to get pressure as well, it helped, of course, they're playing against Columbus. But the fact that the front seven was able to stop the rush and get to the quarterback was pleasant. Now, concerns? Big plays. They gave up too many big plays. And they really kind of kept... And it surprised me. I thought the game plan against Kirk Cousins would be blitz, 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 blitz. Because of how bad he was against the blitz thus far this season. Although teams have only been doing it, I think it was just over 28% of the time they blitzed. But he's 20 points low. His passer rating is 67.8. On 40 dropbacks, they only blitzed him 17 times, which is, in terms of this year, it's right about the norm. But if you look at last year, way below the norm. At least looking at the Pro Football Focus numbers, is Kirk Cousins sort of ripped him apart on the blitz. He played very well against the blitz. But although on paper, on the paper it said it, but when we looked at it on the field, the eye test on the field said, yeah, he struggled with it. And maybe it was just because they were getting more pressure without the blitz than what I was perceiving on the field, because he was clearly rattled. I thought they got good safety play overall. Tyrann Mathieu got significant playing time. He was out of place a couple of times, in my opinion. He took a bad angle, which led to that Deshaun Jackson touchdown. He almost got his hand on the ball on that screen pass that just Jackson ended up taking over 40 yards. With the only thing between him and the end zone was his own lineman who tripped him. But then Patrick Peterson was... And then there was kind of... On that play, on that touchdown, he didn't get the help that he should have had. So, yes, if he got beat, that's on him. But he didn't get the help from Tyrann after that. And that's in part because Washington's play design worked well, because it messed up their coverages. But Arians, and both Keim and Arians were very quick to say, no, I mean, that plays on Patrick. He wasn't playing the right technique. He was playing an inside technique, and Deshaun shouldn't have been able to get inside on him. He should have pushed him out, and then they would have avoided that play completely. So the tackling was an issue, and then, of course, big plays were the issue, because they played well enough up front, but they had enough missed tackles and big plays to kind of nullify how well they played up front.
Yeah, and to go to that Peterson touchdown, because a lot of people are, like, it's a 50-50 split. Like, half the people want to blame Peterson, half the people want to prop up Peterson and kind of find an excuse for what happened on the play. And you kind of hit it on the head, and, they admitted it as much. He just got beat off the line, and that's what lost him the play. Everybody can say, oh, it was a perfect throw and he was in position, but he shouldn't have been in a trail position on an inside route like that. He got turned around at the line. He didn't get his hands on him, and he bailed left instead of trailing right and being able to come over the top. So he had to make up some area, and when he did that, that's what gave the window to Deshaun. You can't expect a guy coming off ACL surgery less than a year ago to be able to come up and make a play on Deshaun Jackson and expect it to go go smoothly. So it was just one of those things. It's a constant issue that we've seen with Peterson, that his technique in certain situations is not where it should be. He still relies heavily on his athleticism and ability, makeup ability, and sometimes it doesn't work. But yeah, I think the secondary continues to be a problem. I don't know if you charted completions at guys, but I had Buchanan down for giving up 4 catches on the day. I always go back and double check everything on Pro Football Focus, and they had him for 5. I might have missed one, or I think I think a lot of times when they're in zone, they just kind of guess. And that's not an insult. I really like Pro Football Focus, and I have a lot of buddies that write for them, so that's really not a shot at them. But I think in zone coverage, they kind of just guess on whoever's closest, not necessarily what zone it's in.
And Kent Hoder does a really good job of that, because he will give a completion to a zone because there wasn't anyone there because of the assignment, and so he will give a completion to an open zone as opposed to a particular player because they were still doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, and I thought I think for me, he gave up 4 in game 1 and game 2, and that's per Pro Football Focus. I don't have my notes from those games, but I had him 4 last game. So, it's again a struggle for him in coverage at times when he's asked to play man up versus that zone where he can attack. Gerard Powers continues to be the best cornerback on the roster, but that's between you and I. But Cromartie Cromartie had an excellent bounce back game. I think you're happy with how he played in that game. It wasn't anything spectacular in terms of game breaking things, but Cousins didn't even look his way. So it was kind of back to games 1 and 2 of the season, and that's what you need from your right cornerback, and I think you saw that. And now the question is, can he continue? The question on the back end has always been, can they put a complete game together, as opposed to how are they playing? Because you've had Peterson struggle in, I think it's now 3 different games. You obviously had last week's debacle with Cromartie in Denver, and so the question is, when are we going to get a complete game from all the secondary? I think this coming week could be that game. And early in the season we blamed it on the front 7, but now I think you're satisfied with how they played. Like you said, the secondary kind of took away from how well the front 7 played.
And in terms of playing time, we saw a little bit of change. Tyrann Mathieu had his first significant playing time. I was beginning to wonder if he was almost a lost cause for the rest of the year. I was beginning to wonder if it was a case of he was healthy and simply had to play well enough to beat out the guys in front of him. I think we have our answer, at least for now, that we're not going to see Tyrann Mathieu in the slot unless Gerard Powers gets hurt. He's been picked on this year, but he's been making plays. He's got the forced fumble. He's got 3 interceptions, which is tied for the NFL lead right now. It's a career high in his career. Arians called him one of the defensive MVPs. Between he and Rashad Johnson as the defensive MVPs, he's out there all that. He's making plays, and I wondered coming into the season if Matthew comes back, what would Powers' role be? I think Powers has grabbed hold of that nickel slot and is just holding on to it. Now, part of that is Matthew is still getting used to run with the brace. Arians made note of that after the game on Sunday. He's got to get used to running with that brace on, something he's still not used to doing. But we have a new rotation. Bruce Arians, this is what I was joking about in text with you and Tyler, and I was like, here's the tease. There's changes in the defensive starting lineup. Arians, here it is. Arians considers that he has 13 starters on defense. He has essentially 7 defensive backs that are starters, but it depends on package. His 12th and 13th starters would be Tyrann Mathieu now and Deone Buchanan, because they come in. Now, Tony Jefferson has just been Kevin Mintered, if you want to look at it this way. TJ will now be the base strong safety or free safety, and Tyrann will come in on nickel and dime packages to play safety that way, so he can play against the pass and be the playmaker that he is. Terod Powers is still going to play. And then what we've seen also is, in terms of the linebackers in base, you've got Kevin Minter, and then Deone Buchanan comes in as the dollar linebacker with his versatility, where he plays inside, outside. He plays in coverage. He blitzes the quarterback. And so Tyrann and Deone are both now quote-unquote starters, even though they don't actually land in the starting lineup. There's your Cardinals defensive change in lineup, is that Tyrann is now apparently, he's back. We're going to see significant Tyrann time. We're going to see a lot of the Badger over the next several weeks of the rest of the season, but we won't see him at nickel corner. We're going to see him at safety, where's the position where they wanted to see him, where they wanted to put him at when they drafted him. Although, come next year, we'll see if they let Gerard go and let Matthew take over the slot again, as they used him last season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I thought Jefferson has played really well so far, and now all of a sudden, Matthew's playing, and I'm not necessarily going to complain because I prefer Tyrann Mathieu over anybody in the secondary at all. But I think with Matthew and Jefferson back there, you have more playmaking ability, but with Johnson back there, you have like a more consistent,
a smarter secondary.
Yeah,
Rashad's he's a very smart player out there. Kent Hodder said this a lot. He's a guy you can win with. I consider Rashad Johnson very underrated. He's become a bigger playmaker than he had in his first 2-3 seasons. I like him, and it's been very interesting because over the last 2 years, last year, it was Rashad that got mintered in a sense, because he was the guy that lost snaps to Tyrann Mathieu. Now this year, he's not leaving the field, and you see where you have it's Rashad Johnson in the pecking order over Tony Jefferson, as opposed to last year that it was Jeremiah Bell who had the higher slot in the pecking order over Rashad Johnson. And Johnson's playing well. I mean, we still see some missed tackles, which is a little bit disconcerting because he's supposed to be a pretty good tackler. He was always a good tackler up until last year. But he tends to be in the right spot. He's smart. He can read coverages. He knows where to put other players. But I think we've seen Tony Jefferson become Kevin Minter, and it depends on the game. It will depend on how much he ends up playing. That's not a slight on him, because they still see Kevin Minter as a very good player too, but they consider him a package player at least this year.
Yeah, and he only got 14 snaps in the game. That was kind of
and that's because they only, and according to the NFL numbers, it actually was they had him 11 They had Jefferson with 11, which was one more than it was the same as Kevin Minter. So they were in for the 3-4 base defense.
Yeah, and so we'll see what happens. It's interesting that now all of a sudden, after needing a safety so bad that we have like 17 of them, it feels like, and after not needing an inside linebacker, we have like 0. So it's just an interesting kind of how everything's twisted about now. So you're seeing Dale Buchanan basically as a rookie playing inside linebacker. I know it's in nickel and dollar situations, as they like to call it, but I think it's interesting that that's his first year. You wonder if that sets him back at all, like moving forward, or if they'll continue to kind of like play a little bit at a time with him, because he played some free safety in a couple games too. So it's not like he's just in the box every play, but that's where he is lining up most of the time. And the Minter, I wrote about this, so I'll just say it right now, because I think the article will be posted before this is posted. But I wonder if Foote is playing so much simply because he's a veteran and he makes the calls, and that's in those those type of things, versus he's actually the better player. Because I don't feel like Minter could be any worse than how Foote has played at this time. So I'm just wondering if it is all this situation of you want some veteran presence out there, especially with the loss of Calais, that you need to see, a little bit more veteran presence and a veteran voice.
And that's where Foote is because he can read plays and know exactly what's happening before they happen. And then Minter's not there yet. Yeah, truly, we've seen Larry miss enough tackles. We've seen him get beat in coverage enough that you probably could say that Minter can't be much worse. But what you lose is the ability to make calls and the ability to see something, which Carlos Dansby did very well. And Carlos Dansby next to Darryl Washington was a really good thing. Darryl Washington to this day is still not great about recognizing defenses, recognizing offenses and blocking schemes. He's just fast. I believe on his top 100 video, the list last year, this last offseason, they made that comment. He does well. What what you say? I don't know. I just got there. He just gets there fast. And Carlos Dansby, while he still has speed, he knows what he's seeing the second that he sees, and that's the case with Foote. On the defensive line, you brought up the fact that Kareem Martin got he had 6 snaps, and he was listed as a starter, and he didn't come in again. I didn't see him the rest of the game. I'll be honest, I didn't see him the entire game. I didn't see him at all. I didn't notice him at the start. He didn't play any outside linebacker this game. We saw lots of Ed Stinson. Bruce Arians was gave a lot of praise to Stinson and his play. I think mainly because he and Kelly and Rucker and Dan Williams did what they needed to do up front. They occupied the offensive linemen, pushed the crowd, and didn't really have to make any plays, but they held up the point of attack to kind of push the line and keep the running backs from making big plays. They held Alfred Morris to a very respectable amount. I mean, in the end, they still allowed about 4 yards a carry. But in the end, 72 yards, you can't complain about that. There's nothing you can complain about that at all.
No, I mean, it's definitely going to be like a step back in terms of raw numbers. But I think in terms of impact, there's not going to be like a whole lot of change. But I will say, you want Calais Campbell back for that Eagles game.
Yes.
DMC, Darren McFadden, sorry, played well this week. So maybe with this new Sperano character, I mean, everybody knows how much he loves to run the football. It's like
Wildcats.
Yeah, it's like
Wildcats.
But we'll see what happens this week, and I think you hate to say this because it's the NFL, but I think you are waiting to see this Cardinals run defense against the Eagles and Cowboys more so than against
Oh, yes.
like Washington and Oakland, who aren't bad, but they're not good either. So you know, outside of the Giants, I don't think they. I mean, the 49ers ran the ball with ease on them. They just didn't run the ball at all. Now, their running backs didn't run the ball with ease, but I mean, in terms of just the run game, they ran the ball with ease.
Yeah.
But their running backs just never carried the ball. So,
And to be fair, the running backs weren't terribly, aside from one or two plays, the running backs weren't effective. And I think that's going to be the Cardinals' bugaboo is if they play a mobile quarterback, and so when they see Russell Wilson, when they see Colin Kaepernick again, their running game numbers won't get hurt by the running backs. They're going to get hurt by mobile quarterbacks who can pick up those 7 yards for the first down because they got nowhere to go and they can just go.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, you know, there's some games that are coming down the schedule that you look at that, again, I don't want to see Calais Campbell this week. I don't care if he's 80%. Just keep him on the sideline. Have him ready for that Eagles game. And then, you know, you have the Eagles, then you have the Cowboys, and the Cowboys might be one of the best teams in the NFL. I know that's like a dirty thing to say in Arizona, but in reality, they just might be one of the best teams in the NFL. And that's an early Sunday game. Even though it's at 11, you know, Arizona time, that's still an early game. The Cardinals don't play early normally. They always seem to come out slow.
And it's in Big D, so...
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you want Calais healthy for those games more than to see him back against the Raiders.
Well, let's kind of skip a couple of things. The Palmer is the future. I don't think we're going to talk about that. But let's kind of combine a couple of topics together. How long the Cardinals can keep winning, and at the same time look at the schedule and key games. Obviously, the Cardinals more or less are where we expected them to be record-wise as we went projecting wins. The early part of the schedule, they needed to do well. 4-1, 5-1 is where I think we both had them at. And then after that is they've got a stretch. The last 10 games is really tough. This is the way it goes. Eagles, Cowboys, Rams, Lions, Seahawks, Falcons in Atlanta, Chiefs, Rams, Seahawks, 49ers. So the last 10 games, there are no sure things. There's no game. There's not a single game out of the last 10 where you can pencil in any wins. Every single game is going to be a dogfight. Can they keep winning the way they're doing? Well,
I think
I don't know.
Outside of maybe that St. Louis game at home, I think I agree with you. You should beat the Rams at home, especially this Rams team. They look very pedestrian a lot of the time. But that second Rams game, people are going to say, well, why wouldn't you say that about the other Rams game?
Thursday night.
Rams game is a Thursday night game in St. Louis. How we know exactly what Cardinals teams show up on Thursday night games. And it hasn't been pretty. Now, maybe this is the year that it changes, and we can hope that. But I think that's why you can't, exactly like you said, you can't pencil in a W, you know, for that December game. But, you know, I don't think you can play like you've played. Let's just put it this way. You can't exchange field goals, or you can't just kick field goals against the Eagles.
Or the Cowboys. Or the Falcons.
Yeah. And the Falcons.
Or the Chiefs, for that matter.
Right now, yeah, the way the Chiefs are playing. And defensive or offensively, you have to be able to sustain long drives against the Lions. We already know you have to do that against the Seahawks and against the 49ers. Because I don't know if anybody's paying attention in Cardinal land, but the Lions are the best defense in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. They're very good. But they can't beat us at home, so I don't feel bad. But if Ryan Lindley can beat him in his rookie year at home without throwing a touchdown pass, yeah, that's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be a dogfight.
Well, and I think the Lions are where the Cardinals were last year, which is odd because it's not like they've lost anything on offense, but they've just changed their offensive philosophy so much that, they're just not as effective as they were on offense. And I know Calvin Johnson's been hurt, but I mean, he hasn't been doing a lot outside of that first game where he absolutely destroyed the Giants. So you look at that and, you have to be able to win in multiple ways. And so far the Cardinals have done that, but now you're going up against, they beat a good 49ers team. They beat a Giants team that
wasn't good yet, but became good.
Yeah, but then they obviously got just drilled this last week. It wasn't even close in that Eagles game. I think if you look at obviously this is gonna kill me when they lose on Sunday, but if you look at the first 6 games and the 5 wins, I know, don't kill me, Cardinals fans, but yes, I think they're gonna win this week. I would say out of those 5 wins, I think that Chargers win is the most impressive. I know everybody loves the fact that they finally beat the 49ers, but I think the Chargers are a better team than the 49ers. I just think, that's just my opinion, but I think that win over the Chargers is more impressive right now than that win over the 49ers. And I think that's your best win. And then, like you said, you go into this 10-game stretch where you're in Philly, or you have Philly here, and then you're in Dallas. Those are 2 tough games, and Philly's been good, and they've kind of won in odd ways so far. Where they've won with defense, they've won with special teams, and they've won with offense. So they haven't really put a full game together yet either, much like we've talked about the Cardinals haven't. So what, is this going to be the first game where both teams put it all together and we get a shootout and everything's clicking for both teams, or does it continue where each team is missing one element and we're waiting to see that full game?
And to the point, I talked to the question that I have is, can the Cardinals keep winning the way they're playing? It'll come down to this. What was their downfall? I look to the 2012 season a lot because I see a lot of the same thing. They have some of the issues. They had glaring offensive line issues in 2012. They had a good defense, and then they were getting decent quarterback play to start the year. The Cardinals this year, their offensive line is better. It's not great. They don't have glaring needs. But with the injuries on the defensive line, you almost feel like what they're doing defensively is almost like smoke and mirrors. What it comes down to, and what it came down to in 2012, is the health of their quarterback. When they ended up playing their backup and third-string quarterback, the season fell apart. Again, it's on Carson Palmer. The Cardinals can keep winning if they keep Carson Palmer healthy and he plays at least Carson Palmer-like games. Even the average, above average play that he's done his whole career, if the Cardinals can play that, if he plays at that level with the defense that it continues to play and the kicker who's out just lights out, they'll continue to win games. I don't think they're going to win 13 games. But if you look at it, 5-1, even if they split the final 5 games, that's 10-6. Now that makes it a little bit dicey, the playoffs, because you have a lot of division games. You've got 5 of your division games in those final 10, so you don't want to split them. But if you look at 10-6, you should make the playoffs. And so you've split those last 10 games. That's playing 500 ball, which you think you should be able to do. You should be looking at the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think you want to get ahead of the Seahawks and 49ers another game. You're basically only a game ahead right now, so you want to see you want to get more games ahead, and that's where it becomes important, because we saw 10-6 last year wasn't good enough. Like you said, if they somehow split that last 10 games, and again, you and I are going to get killed if they lose this Oakland game, and we're counting this as a win already. But yeah, if you want to start, if you split it like that, that just still worries me, because we got burned on that as fans last year, thinking that 10-6 would do it, and then it didn't happen.
Well, and then go back to our preseason predictions. What did I say? 10-6 missing the playoffs. You had them 9-7 making the playoffs, but
yeah, and you know what? That might happen because, well, I didn't think the NFC East would be this good.
Oh,
Let's just put it
who in
that
the
way.
world would have thought that? Jeez.
So you have the NFC North, who has 3 teams that are good. You have the NFC East that has 3 teams that are, or at least 2 teams that are good, and the Giants, who on any given week apparently can beat anybody. And then you have the NFC South, which is now like the NFC East. So I don't think you're going to get 2 teams out of the NFC South now, but you could end up with 2 teams out of the NFC North and NFC East, and only 1 team out of the NFC West.
Yeah.
I mean, because you look at it, the NFC East gets the NFC West this year, so everybody's going to play those teams, and the Cowboys have already beat the Seahawks in Seattle. I mean, it may not be as good of a team in Seattle right now as it was last year, but it still matters.
All right. Last topic, basically whatever you want to discuss. Did you want to get any draft talk in? We're now closing in on almost a minute, an hour 25. So, thank you to whoever is still listening to the show, who has managed to get through nearly 90 minutes of Cardinals talk. So I thank you. I thank you for listening, because that's a long time to listen to us talk, and so we're grateful. We're grateful that you're still listening. Seth, is there? You mentioned on Twitter earlier you want to do a little bit of draft talk. What'd you want to get out there?
Oh, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about, like, through the first part of the season, you kind of look at what the Cardinals have done and kind of putting everything together, and obviously I think before Alex Okafor, everybody would agree that
Edge rusher.
Pass rusher.
Edge rusher.
Was the key need. But, Alex Okafor played well in his first game. The thing is, if Alex Okafor ends up being the next Von Miller, which I don't think he is, but just let's say he is for some odd reason, it still is not going to mean that Edge getting another outside linebacker is not pertinent, because as we've seen, Matt Shaughnessy is a very good outside linebacker against the run, but they need more weapons as a pass rushing team. And that's all I really want to say about the draft coming in there. There's a lot of guys that can bring pressure off the edge. And so in this draft, so I think, even if Alex Okafor is a really solid player and becomes a weapon, you still don't have enough, so I don't think you can cross that off the list, no matter how good Alex Okafor plays.
Definitely. Just as a brief, this is a question I honestly have: is of the guys that you see coming off the board, he has a deep pass rushing, a deep pass rushing class. Are these guys natural outside linebackers, or how many of these are going to be converted from being on defensive end and their hand in the dirt? Because that's another thing. If you get Alex Okafor producing, if you get a converted guy, you're going to have to take time to get him used to playing standing up.
Yeah, and there's a couple. I think the biggest ones are like Randy Gregory out of Nebraska and Vic Beasley out of Clemson. But you're going to get guys coming out of Georgia. Leonard Floyd, I think, is his name. It's escaping me right now. I'm pretty sure it's Leonard Floyd. And some people are going to talk up this kid out of Michigan State, Shalik Calhoun. I'm not a fan. He's a guy that plays with his hand in the dirt. But you do have a lot of guys coming out. They're more underclassmen that stand up and rush already. So I think you're going to have some options this year. The question becomes, and this is a good question, obviously, how many of those guys are going to be available for the Cardinals when they draft? Because I don't think if they make, I think they're going to make the playoffs. So I don't think a lot of those guys are going to be available to them. So then the question becomes, are you going to be willing to package and move up in the draft to go get a pass rusher? I've already stated, I think a Vic Beasley in Arizona is like a perfect marriage because he's a guy that needs a lot of work against the run or dropping into coverage. But he has a good array of pass rushing moves, and he can bend the edge, and that's a guy that could come in and only have to get 20 snaps a game, but they're going to be 20 really productive snaps, and he can be a little bit like Aldon Smith was in San Francisco his first year.
Only hopefully without the
yeah, exactly.
Without the extracurriculars. Well, Arizona Cardinals fans, Revenge of the Birds Radio's listeners, this has been nearly 90 minutes of great, marginal, maybe, Arizona Cardinals talk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it to the end, congratulations. I think this is the longest show we have ever done. It was not intentional. It just went that way. I don't know if we're going to be able to, I've reached out to Silver and Black Pride, our Oakland Raiders SB Nation site. I have not yet heard back from them in terms of getting a guest from them to preview the game. If that happens, I'll have that posted later in the week. But thank you for listening, Arizona Cardinals fans. I'm Jess Root. That's Seth Cox. Thank you for listening.
Have a good one.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/revengeofthebirds.